I'm Christina Shee. I'm the Associate Director of Press Forward, and I want to begin by saying thank you to all of you, newsroom leaders, journalists, editors, entrepreneurs. You are all doing critical, important work in service of your communities, especially under extraordinary circumstances. So we thank you. We also appreciate you for taking time out of your busy days to learn more about this open call. Our goal is to spend the next hour and a half taking through important information and have you leaving feeling prepared as you put together your applications. Next slide. We have a lot to cover today. Our director, Dale Anglin, will talk about Press Forward and how this open call fits into our national initiative. Then we'll dive into specifics of the open call and bring on some of our partners to give you some tips, food for thought, and also share more about how you can get free grant writing help in the coming weeks. And then finally, we'll have time for Q&A. Thank you. And so I'd like to invite Dale Anglin, Press Forward's inaugural director, to say a few words.
Let me add my thanks to all of you for joining us today and for being willing to participate in this webinar and learn more about our open call. I also want to add my thanks to what you all are doing every day to help our local communities and frankly, our whole nation understand what it's like and what's happening on the local level. Next slide. So Press Forward, I don't know if everybody has read all of the wording of all the press about Press Forward. We were launched in September. Staff started a couple of months ago. Our vision really is to think through how do we catalyze more and better funding for local news. We want to strengthen communities over the next 5 years. We want to catalyze a local news renaissance. We want to reinvigorate and raise significant new resources for local news. We understand that you guys are under financial strain. A lot of the sources of revenue that you used in the past don't exist anymore or have moved to other sources. And we want to think about how we can help funders and donors understand the need for local news, similar to the way the foundations and donors give grants to arts organizations or to health organizations or to community development corporations. How can they make sure that local news is one of those issues that they also care about and feel like is important to what they do? And we want to think about journalism philanthropy is fairly new. You all didn't need philanthropy 15 years ago. And so we want to help people who are in this space, be they foundations or donors, learn from each other so that we can get to a shared vision about how we support and build local news and how we can have more coordinated action to help get you to where we would like all of you to be. Next slide. We now are at over 57 funders in our coalition. We have over $500 million committed to this endeavor over the next 5 years. And we're actually now at 22 local chapters because we see the importance of making sure that in addition to national funding, which is important, but we also know that we won't get to where we'd like to be in terms of amount of dollars if we don't catalyze local fundraising. And so the chapters are an important way to do that. Next slide. So there are 3 ways when you're a funder in Press Forward, when you're a member, to invest your dollars. We have an aligned group of funders who they keep their money in their own coffers. They do their own independent grant making, but they are coming together as a learning community to understand what each other are doing, how they can learn from others. They might change what they do over time as they see what are some of the best practices in philanthropy and journalism. We have a number of funders who have given money to a pooled fund. The open call that you see that we're talking about today is from those dollars, and they have pooled their money together to think through how can we support the field. And then we have our local chapters, and that's what I was talking about. We're now at 22 chapters. And those are local funders who care about their local area. It could be a city, it could be a region, it could be a state. They've come together often with their journalism support partners to think through what does their local ecosystem look like, what would they like it to look like, and how can they work together to build back better. And now I think I'm turning it over to Christina to talk about our open call.
Thank you, Dale. So for this next section, we're going to talk about the eligibility and evaluation criteria for the open call. I just want to plug our website, pressforward.news/open call. You can find everything you need to know, including detailed program guidelines in English and in Spanish. Next slide, please. So Press Forward's first open call is deliberately focusing on bridging gaps in local news coverage. We will invest in small local newsrooms that are closing long-standing inequities by producing and providing original reporting to underserved communities. How you are addressing long-standing inequities may look different region to region. So for some of you, you may be specifically focused on serving communities of colors. Other, you may be working on reaching folks in rural areas. Others are in low wealth communities, or maybe there are other groups in your region that are not being served, reached, or represented. Through this cycle, we plan to award 100 news organizations with grants of around $100,000. Grants will be paid over the course of 2 years and will be given as general operating unrestricted support. This means that Press Forward will allow you to make the best call on how to spend this funding. Next slide, please. So what types of organizations can apply to this open call? You must be a US-based local news outlet focused on providing and producing original local reporting. For us, the definition of local is generous. Local can be hyperlocal, a city, a county, and we also understand that in some parts of the country, local can mean state. Your operating budget for this year must also be under $1 million. And if you are a local news outlet that's under $1 million and are affiliated with a larger parent organization, you can still apply as long as you meet all other additional criteria. When you're preparing your application, please answer questions on behalf of your outlet, not your parent organization. For-profits, 501c3 nonprofits, and college newsrooms are also eligible. We understand that sometimes student newspapers are the only source of original reporting in their community. If you are a for-profit, you do not need a fiscal sponsor. And finally, you must have been in operation since September of last year and demonstrate an ongoing commitment to editorial excellence, editorial independence, and transparency. Next slide, please. So as you prepare your applications, we encourage you to review the criteria that's outlined in our program guidelines. It goes into this in more depth. Press Forward will prioritize applications that demonstrate the following. First is addressing gaps in coverage. Again, these gaps may look different from community to community. Your application should address how these audiences have been underserved and how your organization is rising to fill that need. Community-centered. What have you done and what are you actively doing to listen to your community members and your audiences, seek their feedback, and conduct ongoing research? How is this information informing your organization's decisions? With collaboration, we will prioritize organizations that have evidence of strong networks and partnerships with members of their community. And then with sustainability, we want to see that you are intentional about your long-term growth. Our friends at Lion Publishers will talk about their sustainability pillars in a moment, but we want to see how you are being deliberate about your editorial decisions, your financial planning, your operations, and how all of this should fit into your business model. And finally, on leadership, we will support leadership that reflects the community that your organization serves, that listens to stakeholders, and has a clear vision for how your organization is meeting the needs of that community. Next slide, please. So applications will be reviewed by a diverse panel of subject matter experts, including journalism leaders and funders. To ensure that you're being evaluated against your peers, we will be grouping applications into 4 categories. Nonprofit organizations under $500,000 will be one category. There will be another category for nonprofits that are between $500,000 and $1 million, and we will do the same budget breakdown for for-profits. Next slide, please. So finally, here is a quick snapshot of the open call timeline. We will host another Q&A session on June 3rd, and you can register for that at pressforward.news/opencall. And then most importantly, the deadline to apply will be June 12th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern, 8:59 p.m. Pacific. Grantees will be selected and announced this fall. Next slide. So next, I'm going to invite Lindsay Linzer, the Vice President of Community and Community Investments at the Miami Foundation to walk you through the application process.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Lindsay Linzer at the Miami Foundation. We're a community foundation based in Miami, Florida, and are the backbone and the fiscal sponsor for Press Forward. Thrilled to be here today and able to tell you about the application process. The next slide. So I know it says here on this slide that the first thing you should do is register on JustFund. The first thing we actually want you to do is closely review program guidelines on the Press Forward website. It's filled with guidance and really useful information on exactly how to complete your application to Press Forward. So once you've gone ahead and reviewed the program guidelines, please navigate over to pressforward.news/opencall and click Apply Now. That will take you over to JustFund, our grants management platform. Press Forward is excited to be leveraging JustFund to manage our open call. JustFund, in case you haven't already heard about it, is so much more than a traditional grants management system. It's built on a shared common grant application. The first thing you're going to do is register your organization. Please note it may take up to 24 hours for JustFund to approve your registration, so please plan accordingly. Next slide. Great. So now you're registered, you've been approved by JustFund. The next thing you're going to do is complete the common application. So what does that mean? It means that once you register your organization's common application on JustFund, your organization is actually visible to the hundreds of other donors that use JustFund, that platform, for their grant making. A little bit about JustFund. They're aiming to remove the traditional barriers that actually prevent grant makers from moving financial resources efficiently to organizations. So once you've completed the common part of your application, these questions never have to be completed again. You can update them at any time, but you've completed like the core of the application. And then that allows you to apply to any future Press Forward opportunity or any grant opportunity that's available in public on the JustFund platform. For guidance on the questions that are contained in the common application section, please visit our program guidelines, which can be found at pressforward.news/opencall. Next slide. So once you've completed the common application section, you're then going to move over to complete the Press Forward specific open call application. The application itself includes just 3 additional questions beyond that common application, and our goal is to keep it simple. We really want the applicants, we want to make it easy for you to be able to apply, and then make it easy for you to hopefully get your information about your organization in front of as many funders as possible. Back over to you, Christina.
Thank you. So the 3 specific questions that Lindsay mentioned are in the program guidelines, but this is a high-level overview that just tells you a little bit what we're asking for. So the first one is describe their current ecosystem, the current state of your local news ecosystem. How is it being served or underserved by media and funders? And how does your news outlet partner effectively within the local news ecosystem? We also want to know specific information and the audiences that your outlet serves and how you serve them. Include examples of how your outlet is focused on providing accessible, local, community-focused journalism. And then finally, we want to know what would funding from Press Forward enable for your organization. Please share how this funding will help you strengthen your financial health, your operational resilience, and editorial impact. Next slide. You will also be required to include 3 attachments. First is your 2024 operating budget, and this is for your own fiscal year. We know that you may be on a July to June fiscal year, or you may be a calendar year or some other dates altogether. Just specify the dates of your 2024 fiscal year. You'll also need to include a strategic plan or a business plan. And I want to mention that a 1-page overview is sufficient, or maybe a simple lean canvas chart. Again, this is to show that you are being intentional about your plans for growth. We'd also like to see samples of your organization's coverage. And if you like, you can include other information that you think would be helpful for our reviewers. You can include a letter or video of support. And again, this is optional. We're not asking or requiring you to produce a polished, edited video. This is purely optional. Next slide, please. So next, we are going to ask our partners from the Institute for Nonprofit News and local independent online news publishers to offer some tips and food for thought. First, we have Courtney Lewis, Chief of Growth Programs at INN.
Hello, everybody. My name is Courtney Lewis. I am the Chief of Growth Programs at INN. I'm going to the next slide. So INN, or the Institute for Nonprofit News, we're a network of more than 450 nonprofit newsrooms across North America. And as a support organization, our role is really to help members focus on the business side of running a nonprofit news, providing them with resources and coaching to grow revenue, secure talent, and collaborate with one another. My particular specialty, why I'm here, is really thinking about helping our members think about strategy, and particularly as it relates to generating philanthropic revenue. So what I want to do is sort of run through some tips and tricks on how you might think about those three questions that Christina just talked about, and ways you can sharpen your message. Next slide. So it sort of starts with this visual. Really, when you're trying to communicate what you do, who your audience is, and what your unique value is to them, the analogy is kind of like painting a picture. And so there's two pictures on this slide. The first is, really just about all you offer. There's so many layers to what you as a newsroom might be doing in your community. It's a mosaic of your history, your market. There's just a lot there. And when you're speaking to your audience or friend, and certainly in the case of speaking to someone who might be reviewing your pitch, who has no idea of who you are, the goal is to, how do we create this mosaic full of color, full of vibrancy, but how do we translate it into a manner that it can be understood in a very clear and succinct way? So I want to leave you with 3 tips on sort of how to tackle that. The first is, like, when you're painting a picture, that first question in the RFP is going to be about painting a picture about the context of and where your news organization sort of operates. So it's about painting the picture of the place that you're in. What does the media landscape look like? What are the other newsrooms or news providers, information providers that are in your market? Do they even exist? How has that changed over time? Has a local paper in your market recently closed, or are you seeing lots of startups? Are there particular issues or topics that rise to the surface of importance in your community? Is it utilities? Is it water? Is it education? Is it housing? And particularly those topics that you are in a unique position to really address. When you look at all the different types of information providers in your community, which ones are kind of addressing those issues? Which ones aren't? Are there particular members in your community that aren't being served at all? That's the sort of picture you want to help paint to your reviewer. So I want to go to the next slide and I'm going to provide you all with examples along the way. So a great example of this is the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism. They talk about the story of their region, and I'll get this link in the chat after I'm done speaking. But this piece talks about the region they serve. They sort of start with some like historical context of Virginia. They dig into how 40 papers have collapsed in the last 15 years in their state. And then they jump to a few lines about how a VCIJ is a remedy to this gap. So this is a great example that I'll share and is worth sort of taking a look at when you're painting the picture about the place you're in. We can jump to the next slide. This is the most important question, I think, in your work, and not even just for this purpose, but even in just articulating what you do to anyone, which is painting a picture about the people you serve. So it's not just about what you do, it's about what difference it makes in the lives of your audience. Who's your audience? I find that sometimes it's a really hard question to ask, particularly in the context of local news providers, because they generally paint their audience very broadly, as in like everyone in our state or every resident in our city, which I think is good to say, but for the purposes of really painting a picture for a reviewer who may have never been to your state or has never been to your city, give us a little bit more detail. Like, what out of that entire state or out of that city, you know, what communities or subgroups do you really concentrate your efforts most on? Another way to tell your story about audience is to tell reviewers the story about what they care about. You know, what issues are they grappling with as residents? And then how do you know that? You know, do you capture surveys? Do you host community meetings? And when you're interacting with people, what are they telling you that they need? And more importantly, how are you meeting that need? A great example of this is in Lasse Latino. They're based out of North Carolina, and on their About page, they talk about being the first digital media Spanish language paper that covers government, that covers immigration, that covers politics in the state. And if you check out their page, you can scroll down to see how they tell this story and articulate who they serve in a very specific way and why they've chosen to serve that community. So the last tip I want to give you is to talk about what you do best. And it kind of links to the first two. You know, telling the story about your place sort of sets the context. Telling the story about your audience gives a narrative into who you're serving. And the last part and the last question of the RFP is like asking, well, how do you meet that need? How are you filling the gaps of the picture that you just painted for me? So what are you doing to meet the needs of your audience? Again, I'm sure there are 500, you know, things that you could list, but how do you articulate maybe the top 2 or 3 that really sharpen and help a reader understand what is unique about your offer and what is most impactful about your offer? So sometimes this can be demonstrated through data, which I think is important, like your audience reach, particularly levels of engagement, but the RFP is also going to ask for very specific examples. So tell a story. How has your work helped to reveal or prevent corruption? How has your work connected a community or a community member to a resource? How have you gone about expanding your audiences and reaching people with news that they say they need and want? Try to tell a story in that. And so one example of this, and this will be my last slide, is Fresno Land, based out of California. They're a nonprofit newsroom based there. And in one of their newsletters recently, they talk about how one of their reporters uncovered ways the city's budget committee was violating California law to be transparent and be open. And shortly after that coverage that they did, suits were brought against the city to help basically mitigate and create a more transparent budgeting process. So that's something that can be shared in a quick paragraph of just a story that a reviewer can really resonate with a reviewer and be memorable with a reviewer as they're looking at your application. So with that, I will share that link in the chat, and then thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Courtney. So next we're going to have Chris Cruson, the Executive Director of Lion Publishers, talk about sustainability.
Yes, that's me. Thank you very much for the intro, and thanks so much to the organizers for including Lion's definition of sustainability in the open call. We're really proud of that. I've been here at Lion for 5 years now, but before that, I was in many of your shoes. I was working in a local newsroom. I was the first employee of one in Philadelphia called Billy Penn. And since then, I have sort of taken the reins here at Lion and built this organization to be focused purely on the question of sustainability. Next slide, please. Lion is a place that helps newsrooms build sustainable businesses. We came up with this framework for sustainability while we were creating a program of our own that put a revenue generating employee in a local newsroom for 2 years for a dozen newsrooms. And along the way, every one of those newsrooms needed something in order for that program to be successful, but not all 12 needed the same thing. Some needed a payroll system in order to pay that full-time employee and give them benefits. Some needed a way to track website visitors and their analytics were not working. Some needed a chart of accounts to track where money was coming and going. So we developed a framework and a checklist in order to help keep track of those things. Next slide, please. Which led us to this Venn diagram looking thing that we've shared a few times. When you're thinking about operational resilience in this context, without the right culture and systems, it's harder to support your staff. It's harder to grow, even if your staff is just yourself and you're only barely starting to pay yourself anything. News businesses without strong operational resilience experience burnout, which can cost them the people whose talent and buy-in they need to succeed. When we think about financial health, without a plan for earning money, knowledge of managing your budget, and monitoring revenues and expenses, news businesses can get to the end of their runway without the tools and data they need to acquire more dollars or right-size their operations. And finally, journalistic impact, which Courtney did a great job at outlining a few minutes ago. Without a track record of that impact in their communities, news business will either gradually or suddenly lose investors, sponsors, and readers whose support got them where they are. We see this as not sustainability, as not being any one of these things, but rather these three things working together. Next slide, please. So our first example, our only example of operational resilience comes from the folks up in Canada, actually at Taproot Edmonton. They created new and updated systems, processes, and practices to grow and strengthen their team. They adopted user manuals, and you should Google that. We use them here at Lion. They're very helpful. A regular mental health check-in, and established a regular opportunity to celebrate wins. Throughout this process, they sought feedback from their team, and their board, such as how to improve their weekly meetings, what to add to their intranet, and training videos, and how to incorporate those user manuals into their process. Next slide. Our example of financial health comes from Massachusetts and the Bedford Citizen, which was a participant in our cohort-based lab program that we ran last year around sustainability. The Bedford Citizen, which had been reporting on their corner of Massachusetts for more than a decade, they had a dedicated working board, but the volunteers were, without much surprise, after a decade, starting to burn out. They needed a transition from a working body to a managing one, streamline tasks, and make decision-making easier to find growth opportunities for revenue. By combining several financial and revenue templates that Lion offered, they developed a customized spreadsheet that provides a bird's eye view of new revenue opportunities, including columns for calculating expenses and assessing the potential return on investment for each idea. It also included mission alignment, resource availability, financial feasibility, and most importantly, staff capacity. The master spreadsheet revealed nearly a dozen new and reimagined ideas. Next slide. And finally, we want to talk about journalistic impact through the lens of Maritza Felix, who launched Connect to Arizona, which started as a WhatsApp conversation with her mom during COVID-19. Her mom was in Northwest Mexico, and Maritza was in Arizona, sharing news and information in Spanish, but first sharing quotes and prayers, and at the very end, information about COVID-19 that she had been hearing, which her daughter would fact check, including advice like baking soda and lemon protect you from coronavirus, which Maritza did not think was correct, and it wasn't. This led to a WhatsApp group of friends and family to talk about what was going on with COVID, because in Arizona, there was no information available in her area in Spanish. Whatever she had and saw were bad Google translations from the government. The informal messages that were occasional became routine. Recipients expanded to more than 5,000 people, and Connect to Arizona was born. Since then, the organization has grown, explained pandemic-era border restrictions, answered more than 100 questions a day, and began the process of getting another Peruvian consulate in their part of Arizona, which is huge. And that is my last slide. Oh, sorry. The examples, by the way, shared how intentional work done around each of those pillars led to the organization becoming more sustainable over time. Applicants can ask themselves how their business can measure your progress against the pillars of operational resilience, financial health, and journalistic impact. What progress have you made? Where do you need to make progress? And how would a grant such as this allow you to make progress in those areas? Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Courtney. That was really helpful, and I'm sure many of you are buzzing with ideas and thinking about how you can incorporate your story into your applications. So if you need some help or guidance, or maybe want a sounding board, our partners at the Lenfest Institute for Journalism have organized some incredible resources that you all can take advantage of for free. I'm going to invite our friends Annie McCain-Madonia and Yossi Lichterman. They head up the News Philanthropy Network and will share more about what they have arranged. You can go to the next slide.
Thank you, Christina. Yossi and I are going to walk you through some of the tools that we're able to provide all of you with to help you put your best foot forward and provide some support in grant writing, especially because so many of us are just digging into this for the very first time. The Lenfest News Philanthropy Network provides year-round coaching and training in all aspects of fundraising online, and you can access those courses and materials on our website and see the things we have coming up. But today we're going to talk specifically about tools to help you write your grants for this particular project. If you can move to the next slide. We have a couple of tools that we're going to dig into a little bit, and then Yossi's going to walk us through how to actually sign up for the support. We have on our website an introduction to grant writing. It's a course and a workbook, an asynchronous learning tool that you can access at any time with free video lessons and a workbook with best practices and other resources. And we're also happy to provide one-on-one support from a fundraising coach through Zoom sessions who will provide you with strategy planning and feedback and editing on your applications. So if you can move to the next slide. The first is our Intro to Grant Writing. As I said, it's an asynchronous course that's on our website. It is free, of course. You can sign up through this QR code on our website and at the link down below. There are 12 video lessons in separate chapters with full slide decks, a workbook, and lots of resources and case studies presented by two experts who have been doing this program for us for a couple of years. And I think you might find very helpful as you get started and you want some support on your own time and in your own way. The second tool we're happy to provide on the next slide, please, is fundraising coaching. Thanks to the good folks at Press Forward, every applicant is eligible to receive up to an hour of virtual coaching sessions. And there are two types of sessions. One we're calling strategy planning, where the fundraising coach will offer you strategic guidance and support on how you can best position yourself for support in your grant application. We've heard a lot about the guidelines and the application process and wonderful helpful hints on how to tell your story and talk about your work. The coach can help you frame that for your organization. Then a session on application review, where the coach will review a draft of your application and offer feedback, specific feedback about what you're saying and how you're saying it to make sure you're clear and hitting all the points that Press Forward would like to see about your work. Signups will go live on our site on May 13th, and now Yossi will walk us through how to sign up via Calendly and submit your documentation and tell you a little bit about the coaches we've engaged. Yossi?
Thank you so much, Annie, and thank you to everyone at Press Forward. We're so thrilled to partner together. We hope, excuse me, that the sign-up process will be pretty simple. We have 8 incredible fundraising coaches. They each will have a Calendly link on the Lenfest Institute website listing their availability across time zones and across dates throughout the application process. And as part of the sign-up process, applications will have to answer a few registration questions on questions around their budget size and what they're hoping to learn and talk about with the coach, as well as a few demographic and other detailed questions so we can get a sense of who is using the questions. After you fill out the Calendly, you'll be redirected to what's actually a type form, not a Google form, very similar concept, to fill out the details and submit any documentation to the coach. And if you go to the next slide, you'll get a sense of what that looks like. You'll enter your details, answer a little bit about your organization, choose the date that works for you, and then also get sent to the second page where you'll be able to fill out the details and add a little bit more information. And so if we go to the next slide, you'll be able to meet our fundraising coaches. They have a wealth of experience both within the news industry, within nonprofit fundraising more generally, and all have tremendous expertise that they are really excited to be able to share with you. Each of them will have a bio on our site, so you'll be able to learn a little bit more about them and hopefully work with a coach that meets your needs and serves your circumstances. And next slide. The one other element of coaching that we're really excited about is there will be in-person office hours with one of our coaches, Jill Kunishima, who's formerly of Cityside, at INN Days in San Diego. There'll be 30-minute coaching sessions, and INN will share details to registrants and folks who are attending the conference about the best way to take advantage of that. But Courtney, feel free to jump in if there are any other details you'd like to add.
No, you've covered it, Yossi. I'll drop a link to INN Days in the chat for those who are curious about what it is, but we'll have an area for in-person meetings with Jill to help review your grant materials.
Thanks, Courtney. And one thing to note also, you will get the slides. So if you go to our website right now to sign up for coaching, you can't sign up for coaching yet. It'll be there on Monday. But what you can do right now is enter your email address and you'll get an email from me letting you know when the sign up is available. So feel free to drop your email address there to get updated on when the coaching signups go live.
Thank you, Yossi and Annie. And just another plug for our website, pressforward.news/opencall. We also link to the Lenfest resources from there. So if you forget, always go to that place. So now we are going to take some questions. It looks like we have a lot that have been submitted through the Q&A. We're also going to stop sharing our screens so we can open this up.
Terrific. You are right. We have 53 open questions. We've already answered 65 in the chat. So I'm going to start sharing some of the ones that we were hoping to share verbally and answer so that everybody has the benefit of having their questions answered and so everybody gets the answer. So the first question, we actually had a lot of questions about the definition of kind of the newsroom operating budget versus the overall organization budget. And so if you could just give some extra detail about our thinking there as it relates to budget and what we're looking for as part of this open call, I'll hand that to you first, Christina.
So for budgets, we are looking at your operating budget for 2024. And again, we said that can be your own fiscal year. So you may be on a July to June cycle, a calendar year cycle, or some other dates altogether. And you have to be under $1 million.
And to, some of these questions got really specific in saying, well, we offered some new earned income strategies as part of our budget, but that now puts us over $1 million. Do those things count as part of our operating budget? And what would be your answer to that for those that are inquiring about these other lines of business they've now created to help sustain themselves? Does that count in their operating budget?
I would say yes, which I would also say this is a great place to be. And I know you are straddling and I totally feel that, but this is also a sign that you are on a growth trajectory too.
Perfect. Thank you. Dale, I'm going to feed the next question over to you. So there's some questions in here about collaboration. And so can outlets come together to form a network and apply and receive this grant together? Are you considering applications from partnerships and multiple organizations? And if so, should each individual as part of the collaborative have a budget under $1 million? Or does it need to total up to less than $1 million? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, let's start with if you're a collab, but you may be hyper local, And so you have budgets of $100,000. If they total up to $1 million, then you could probably apply. But if each of your operations have over $1 million budget, you could not apply as a collab. We're trying to have individual organizations apply as much as possible to be able to compare apples and apples. Christina, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that was great.
Perfect. Thank you. Next question also for you, Dale. What is the smallest scale of community that's defined by press sellers?
Yeah, so we're letting you define community. We understand that that could be city, county, state. It could also be a neighborhood, maybe a large neighborhood in a community. It could be a small rural community of 2,000 people. It could be a part of, I'm from Chicago. Chicago has neighborhoods of, 10, 20,000 people. So really you get to define your geography. Local for us is, what does local mean for you? We just know it doesn't mean national.
Perfect, thank you. Christine, this one's for you. Are there rounds of applications? So for example, do we apply to this first call and then will there be a finalist round? Like, is there a phase 2 of this application, or once somebody submits the application, is that it?
So when you submit the application, that will be it. As Lindsay mentioned, we are deliberately working with a portal called Just Fund to streamline this and make this an easy lift on you. So once you apply, then that will be it.
Perfect, thank you. Dale, so there's some newsrooms that have written some questions about, they're debating whether they should apply now or should they wait till a future open call. So are you able to share anything about focus or eligibility requirements for future open calls?
So the answer is, if you qualify for this one, you should apply for this one. Let's start there. If you're under the $1 million or right at the edge, you should apply if you're an outlet. We have announced that we will do a second open call this fall around transformation. That's going to definitely be for budgets for organizations that are larger. That's not just going to be for outlets. That could include universities. That could include journalism support organizations. It can include policy organizations. So that one is not just going to be for news outlets. We don't know other open calls in the future. We expect to have them over the next 5 years. But I would just say, if you are meet the criteria and you're available and willing to apply right now, please go do so.
Perfect, thank you. Can you, Dale, please explain in detail the 3 categories of eligibility we've read about, and then define what low-income rural means and how is low-income rural defined?
Okay, Christina, help me out on this. The 3 categories around.
So when we're talking about serving underrepresented audiences, yes, or closing longstanding inequities, we wanted to be able to illustrate a variety of different inequities that your community may be facing. But similar to what Dale had said before about how we're thinking of small, this is also for you to define, because we know that every region is so different. It could be just serving specific racial groups, different groups that speak other languages, rural areas or low wealth areas. It could be a combination of all these things. But again, this is really for you all to define what are the unique circumstances of your region and how is your organization stepping up to fill that need.
Thank you. I'm actually going to go ahead and answer one of the next questions. So we got a few questions that came in that talked about, there being one parent organization that actually has several newsrooms underneath it, and the question of whether they should apply as one entity as the parent organization or for each individual newsroom. And my response that I typed already to a few people, but I'm going to share for the benefit of the group, is that for one application is eligible for one grant. And so if the individual newsrooms want to be eligible for the work that they're doing serving their local community, they need a profile on Just Fund, and they need to apply and answer the questions about how they're serving their local community. And then the follow-up question is, do they need a different email address for each profile? I actually don't know that answer, and we can follow up with Just Fund to find out if a different email address is required for each profile, but I believe you should be able to create profiles for the different kind of newsrooms that are serving different local communities. Perfect. Okay. Next question we have in here. Is Press Forward offering resources beyond financial, for example, to networking or to mentorship? Christina, do you want to take that one?
Yes, this is something that we're actively thinking about. We know that it is so challenging to go at it alone. So we have been talking to some of our partners in the space to think about what are the programs or cohorts or networks that we can connect our grantees with during the course of their 2-year grant period. We are still talking through what these ideas could look like, but know that we are thinking of it.
And can I add, we're gonna, as applicants come in and as we pick our applicants, that can be determined by who gets a grant. So if 50 of the groups really want to learn about tech, it turns out, and then we would form some tech cohorts, right? So we really are trying to customize that support based on who ends up getting the grants.
Can you explain, one of the attachments that's required is either a strategic plan or a business plan. Can you expand on what you're hoping to see in that attachment?
So this goes back to the idea of sustainability and some of the elements that Chris and Courtney had talked about. How are you taking all of these different ideas and putting it into a plan? And we understand that a business plan or a strategic plan can be different for every stage of growth, which is why we're saying that a one-page overview is sufficient, or maybe you like the lean canvas model where you're filling out a chart that really asks, how do you know the audiences that you're serving? How are you meeting their need? What do you need on the back end to help fulfill that mission? Is it staffing? Is it tools? Again, this is all the elements that give us a well-rounded picture of essentially your business. This is what we want to see, and we just want to see how you are thinking about growth beyond the next 2 years. Even if it's, maybe bite-sized, if you're an organization starting out, or something you have been thinking about with your whole staff member for a while, if you're a little bit further along. Again, this could look different for all of your organizations depending on where you are.
Perfect. We got the question of how many applications does Press Forward expect to see? That's the $1 million question. Any guesses here, Dale?
Well, we've done some back of the envelope calculations with our partners here on this call, actually. How many nonprofit organization outlets are there even in existence? How many for-profit that are, under a certain amount? And we're up to, I think, 700 or something like that if you add them all together. And so we're not sure how many we will get, but we are assuming we will get over a couple of hundred.
Perfect, thank you. Another question related to applying as a collaborative. What if the collaborative is not an incorporated entity itself? Is that going to be an issue? Can they apply? It's not a legal entity.
Someone has to get the grant. And so in the end, you either need, if you're applying as a collaborative and it's several groups and you add up to $1 million, that's saying you're going to share in the money, because you're not getting more than the 100,000 as that one entity, let's be clear. Somebody's got to be designated to receive the dollars. So that's either one of your collaborative members who has a 501c3, or actually it could be a for-profit, but agrees to then divide the dollars up amongst your collaborative. Does that make sense, Lindsay?
Yep, exactly. So when you're putting in your profile into Just Fund, there's actually a question of do you have a fiscal sponsor? And so in that field, you put in who is the lead organization that would be the recipient of the money if you got this grant. And so you would apply, use the common application questions to describe the collaborative, and then use the specific application questions to tell us about the work you've been doing together and plan to do together if you got the grant, and then who the money would go to if it was actually awarded. So we got a question that came in a few times. That's really trying to understand, how do you weigh majority of content focused on local news, especially in the context of public media? And so there was a few radio stations that asked questions about how are we going to judge, within a 24-hour day, that how are we going to be looking at how many hours of news is provided versus other sorts of information, and what should they be thinking, and should they apply?
Well, first of all are open to apply, and the threshold is really the $1 million. It's open to for-profit and nonprofit. It could be a small local radio if you're doing original local reporting. It could be a small public media station if you're doing original local reporting. I think it comes down to original local reporting, and that's probably more than once a day. I mean, comparing you with somebody who's putting out multiple stories a week, be it print or digital, you know, you might not rise to the top. So think about what local reporting are you doing, and how is that serving the community?
Yep, perfect. We got a question here, Christina. You know, the $1 million income requirement from 2023, or what's expected in 2024. So it's less like it's about your expenses. Like, what is your organization operating on this year? Your planned budget for 2024. Anything you want to add there, Christina?
No, I mean, again, just keep that $1 million threshold in your mind. So I know that there are different ways that you may try to see how you can get that number, but just keep that number in your mind. 2024 $1 million operating budget.
Okay, we got another question in here, you know, asking about, to meet the $1 million budget requirement, can the network exclude kind of pass-through money such as ad campaigns and re-grants? I think when you're thinking about the operating budget, it includes everything.
It's all in. Yeah, it's all in. Right.
It's all in. We've already kind of answered, can Atlas form a network to apply for and receive the grant together? Yes, with a lead entity, but you're also going to show through your application that you have a history of partnership and a plan for going forward partnership to collaborate if you could get the resources. And then if the outlets form a network, will they be excluded if that network was not in existence prior to 2023, September 2023, when we said that they had to be kind of operating?
You know, I would just say it's probably not always a great idea to form a new network right now to get these dollars, because you haven't probably worked together before. If you have been working together and you trust each other in terms of how money is going to flow and how you're working together, that makes sense. But if you're going to form a network just for this, I would probably, I can't tell you not to do it, but you need to make sure you understand how our dollar is going to flow when this grant is, if this grant is awarded.
Yep, I appreciate that. Next question. Do you expect small individual newsrooms to have already shown impact at the startup phase? And then if so, what are some examples of kind of impact light if you're not yet making a major impact because you're in that startup phase?
I think the example that Chris shared with Connecticut, Arizona is a great example. She started as a WhatsApp platform for people in her community and was able to provide critical, time-sensitive information about COVID to the specific groups that she serves. So to me, that seems like a clear example of impact.
And there are just multiple ways for you to describe what you currently do, which audiences you currently serve. And we understand that you may not have evaluations of exactly what changed based on your reporting. But you can say, for example, we had a group at one point where they started focusing on their school board elections. And to be honest, no one else had been focused on the school board elections. So just the fact that you are now focusing on that in a way that we know is important to a lot of people, you may not have exact evaluation of what that reporting has done, but you can show that you have filled a gap that no one else was doing.
Great. Questions keep coming.
Just one thing, Courtney, did you want to say something about impact?
Yeah, I was going to say particularly the startup phase, a lot of people, another way to demonstrate impact is talking about the ways in which you've listened. Like, what have you observed? Who have you gathered? A lot of people in the startup phase are doing like gatherings at libraries, talking to communities, coffee sessions, like basically listening and setting the groundwork to understanding what the community need is. That would be another way to demonstrate impact. It's just echoing what Dale just said, but that's what I've seen a lot of people in the early phases do to articulate where they're thinking. of going.
And Courtney, while we have you on camera, here's a good question possibly for you to answer. Are there examples of successful local news sites that focus on a specific neighborhood within a large city? I bet there's tons of examples within the INN network.
I'll give one, Cicero Independiente. They are, you know, part of the broader Chicago region. And Cicero is also like a suburb of Chicago that has its own city, but Cicero Independiente, they focus on Spanish speaking community and immigrant community, which is like it's like a microcosm of a big metropolitan area. And we see that a lot, like people who serve a particular community in a region. Sahan Journal is another example. They serve immigrant community within the larger St. Paul and Minneapolis region. So I think I'm trying to think of others. I'm sure there are others, but yeah, there's plenty of people, and you could confine your audience. And when you talk about your audience, especially in local, if you serve a broad city or a broad state, I think it's so important to take us a layer deeper to talk about what segment of that audience or what segment of that community you serve.
Perfect. That's really helpful. Thank you, Courtney. We got a question here. So our paper previously operated as a subsidiary of another nonprofit, but recently branched off and became our own nonprofit at the start of this year. Would that affect the eligibility under the requirement that they be in operation since September 2023?
Oh, that's a good question. We probably prefer groups that have been in financial and fiscal operation since January. I mean, since September of 23, right? So I don't know, Lindsay, what do you think?
I'd say make the case. Use your application, make the case. It sounds like you've already been in operation and publishing since well before that September 1st date. And so if you can show us through your application how you've been serving the local news needs of your community, like I think it's worth making the case, because it sounds like, you do meet most of the criteria. Again, there's sometimes questions here that are getting in the chat that are super specific. So if we're not able to answer them live, we're encouraging folks that after today's webinar to go send a more detailed email to grants@pressforward.news, and we can do a more detailed response if we're not able to kind of answer your specific question here. But we're going to keep going. I think we have another half an hour left, so we're just going to keep answering questions until we've tried to get through all of these. So a question looking out to the future: what is our reporting process going to look like for those that are awarded a grant?
So we expect to make decisions by the end of the summer. As you hope you've seen, we're going to be compensating reviewers so that we will have a mix of journalism practitioners, funders, and possibly people from universities all reviewing grants together. So we'll be, often judged by peers. We will be publishing both the applicants who are the winners, and also publishing the names of the reviewers, which is a best practice in philanthropy to do that, so people understand who was reviewing. And we're hoping, to be honest, as you guys get into cohorts, to stay in touch with you over the 2 years, bring you together with not just with each other, but probably with our partner foundations, so that we can be learning what you're doing and being willing to support you throughout those 2 years. You're part of our family once you become one of our grantees.
And then in terms of grant reporting, Lindsay, we are looking at, the grant period is 2 years. So we will be asking for an annual report that gives us an update on how you are doing. And then you will also need to fill that out to get the second installment of your grant. But again, similar to how we're structuring the application, we really want to be mindful of the capacity and your own bandwidth. So every decision that we are making is taking that into account with how intensive our reporting process will be.
Perfect, thank you. Courtney, another question that may actually be for you. So we see that applications close on June 12th. So the mention of INN office hours, is that for other issues? Can you explain what INN is offering?
Yes. So in the context of Press Forward, INN, isn't offering anything specifically that is press forward because the team over at Lenfest has like the official press forward office hours. However, if you are an INN member, like we have folks on staff who are on this call to get all the information that you're receiving so that we can also help you. So you can come to us. We have network philanthropy coach, myself, I'm available. A number of us we have an audience person who's available that could take questions about how you can describe your audience. So we are here for our nonprofit newsroom members to also troubleshoot and think through your questions. You can tap into both resources.
Thank you, Courtney. I'm going to answer the next question. We've gotten a question a few times. Is should I apply as a fiscally sponsored nonprofit, or should I apply as my kind of for-profit newsroom? And so it really is a case-by-case decision. We recognize that if you're a for-profit newsroom who has a charitable purpose and has a fiscal sponsor, that fiscal sponsor is probably taking a fee. And so you may not want to be applying using your fiscal sponsor if you don't want a fee taken. On the other hand, if you're working towards becoming a nonprofit, a fiscal sponsor is helping you manage your budget, you're tracking all of your grants and expenses through them, it really may make sense financially for you to continue, if you got this grant, to have it be operated through your fiscal sponsor. It's a case-by-case personal decision. We are not requiring for-profit newsrooms to have a fiscal sponsor to be able to apply for this. If you can make the case that you're a for-profit newsroom serving community local information needs, you can receive the grant from us directly. So again, it's going to be a case-by-case decision if you have a fiscal sponsor, whether you want to apply using that fiscal sponsor or not. We got a few questions in here, Dale, that are related to, I'm a small newsroom, or we only do this, and I know at Press Forward, we were trying to think about all of the possible scenarios, but at the same time, leave room for individual organizations to make the decision themselves about whether they're a fit. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we are a learning community here at Press Forward, and the one thing we all know is that we have so many different types of outlets, different sizes, focusing on different communities. And we want to learn through this first open call. And so we encourage all types of outlets, if you meet the criteria, to apply. We're purposely, though, not going to compare apples and oranges. So, for example, if you have a budget of $1 million versus you have a budget of 200,000, you're not going to be in the same category. We're going to have reviewers divide you up. So we'll look at organizations of under 500,000 and over 500,000, right? Because we know not to compare you to. But I would just say, please, if you've got the inclination to apply, please do so. Also, see this as a training opportunity. We are trying to convince philanthropy. We've convinced some, and we're trying to convince others to see journalism and local news as an important philanthropic effort. And so hopefully this will not be the first time you're going to apply for a grant. So even if you don't get this grant, see it as a training opportunity for you or your advisors or your volunteers to understand what it's like to apply for these types of grants. Because most foundations use some process like this. And so it's a good way to understand what some of those processes look like. We are trying to be as expansive as possible in our criteria for who gets to come in. And as we see patterns over time with all the applicants, we'll make decisions based on that. But right now, we're not trying to exclude people. We're trying to include people.
Thank you. Question for you, Christina. So should the annual operating budget include the potential grant from Press Forward? And then as a secondary question, what would this funding support?
So I would say no, do not include this a potential grant. In terms of what this funding would support, that is your choice. What we mean by general operating is that you will have the control and the agency to decide how you need to spend this money to take your organization to the next level. Some of you may be one or two two-person newsrooms that are working multiple jobs and you need the money to start paying yourselves. Some of you may need to hire a business development person to help with ad revenue. Some of you may need to upgrade your website or get a database to track some of your donors. So some of you may need all of the above, and that is totally okay. You have the flexibility to decide how you want to spend that funding.
Thank you, Christina. Question for you, Dale. How elaborate should the business or strategic plan be?
I think like Christina said, we want to know your either prior thinking, like you already have a plan and you're giving us a synopsis of that plan because we don't want 20 pages, or we want a sense of what you are thinking about for the future. And so that could include, you could have 4 categories on a business plan, right? Staffing, finances, tech, and what are you thinking about in those places? But the point is, usually you're not running an outlet today the way you ran it 10 years ago. What has changed? What is it that you think you need to move to the next level? Do you need advisors? Do you need a different tech stack? Do you need a way to track your website, people coming to your website? All of that can go into a strategic business plan about what do you think you need to cover what you want to do in your neighborhood, however you define your neighborhood or your region. Do you think you really need 5 reporters and you're now at 3? The goal is to get to 5. I know I need to pay a person, pick an amount, and you're putting that into that plan. You're not there yet. It's okay. We understand that. But you've thought about what you need to get to do the kind of coverage that you want to do in your community. Those are business and strategic plans. And we don't have to have proven that you've done it all yet, but we want to know that you're starting to think about it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The next questions that we have here. So we got a question that says there seems to be a lot of focus on nonprofits. How do for-profits fit into the application process?
So,
Christina?
yeah, so for-profits can apply, and you will follow from a technical standpoint, you will follow the same process with creating an account on Just Fund and applying. In terms of for-profits, again, we're also going to evaluate for-profit organizations together. We understand that you are all coming from different experiences with writing grants. So for-profits of a certain budget size will be in one category, and then another budget size will be in another category. And for us, as we were thinking about who this open call could help, we made a deliberate choice to include for-profits because when we think about this crisis of local news and information across the country, we think about how our community members and neighbors are getting information. In some places, we need all of the solutions. So we are really being expansive with this open call. And so you are totally eligible to apply if you meet the budget, local, and other criteria.
Can I just add that when you just look at the types of news outlets that we currently have left, the for-profits dominate. And so even though nonprofits are being started at a pretty quick rate over the last few years, we still have way more not for-profits than we do nonprofits. And that's probably going to be the case going forward for quite a while. So we couldn't not support for-profits. And we understand that when we say for-profit, some of you are barely profitable. You're not making tons of dollars on this. But we also understand you've not been in this philanthropy world, right? You're not used to writing grants. So think about it this way. If you are running an operation that's under $1 million, even if you are incorporated as a for-profit, if you feel like you need other revenue sources in addition to what you currently are doing, you're getting some subscribers, you're getting some members, maybe there's I don't know, it's about a paywall, but people are paying for something, but you want to be able to do more, and you should be able to, you should do more because the community is demanding more. Just think of philanthropy as another revenue source. This is just one way to get at those dollars.
Gail, another question for you. What is the initial source of funds available to Press Forward for this funding opportunity? Meaning, like, how did Press Forward get these funds to actually be able to have them to share as part of this process?
Ooh, that's a good question. So when we said earlier in the conversation that $500 million has been committed initially to Press Forward over the first 5 years of our existence, a portion of those dollars, about 70 or 80 million, have been put into a pooled fund. And those dollars literally were foundations and individual donors giving money already to the Miami Foundation, who houses us. Thank you very much, Miami Foundation. A pool so that we can figure out ways jointly to learn how to deploy those dollars toward understanding more about the field and supporting the field. So the money that we are deploying right now through this open call is coming from 11 foundations and donors around the country who believe in what you're doing, local news, and want to see it supported.
We got a great question here from someone who clearly knows about the different types of funding under Press Forward. So this open call is coming out of the pooled fund, but how can organizations get proposals in front of aligned funders?
Christina, you want to take that?
So with our aligned funders, every funder has their own way of grant making, of building relationships with grantees. Maybe they do their own open calls, but it's really different. And so as Dale said that, this is an opportunity for you all to help build some muscle and think about how you can continue to pursue philanthropic funding. This is a chance for all of us at Press Forward to help shape the giving of philanthropy on the journalism side. So as part of this work, we will be surfacing grantees that fit certain specific issue areas or geographic parameters that fit the needs of our aligned funders, and we'll be working to help them understand who is out there in the space that they may not be currently funding. With our local chapters, we will also be doing the same. We have 22 chapters now, and as you all begin to apply, we will also curate and surface those organizations to our local chapters. So when they get to their grant making stage, they will also understand who is in their local media ecosystem. I would also encourage you to take a look at the resources that Lenfest have put together, and maybe if Annie or Yossi can talk about that grant writing course. That is a very timely, evergreen resource. This walks you through some of the general best practices about how do you even approach a funder? How do you begin to do research? How do you find alignment? We know that tapping into philanthropic sources of funding is probably a new thing, and it will take some time for this culture to change. But part of this is also trying to demystify things on both ends and provide more information on how to pursue that. Annie, I'll let you share a little bit more.
Thanks, Christina. I think Yossi has just put into the chat a link to our grant writing, our asynchronous grant writing program that's on our website that everybody can check out. And it goes through how to get ready to write a grant for a foundation from beginning to end in 12 very digestible, short chapters with a workbook that can guide you along the way through each of those chapters and how you think about finding funders, how you write about yourself, what funders are looking for, how you think about impact measurements. So that's a really great tool for you to avail yourself of early on, so you get a sense of what funders may be looking for. But then the fundraising consultants that we've engaged can get really specific with you about what it is Press Forward has told us they're looking for and how to talk about yourself in the best light for that particular grant application and help you edit it as well. So the two tools sort of take you from the top of the funnel in a way down to something very specific. So hopefully they'll be helpful. And of course, you can reach out to me or Yossi at the Lenfest Institute anytime for additional guidance, as well as the folks at Press Forward and the Miami Foundation.
Perfect. Dale, a question for you. So what is the indirect policy for this grant and of Press Forward?
For the fiscal agent, what's the
No, not for the fiscal agent.
Oh, you mean just in general?
This
is general operating support. So
exactly.
You can use this in any way you want. We're not setting a threshold for, you have to spend 10% on indirect, or you can only spend 10% on indirect. We understand that some of your indirect costs are your major costs. So when we say general operating, that really is unrestricted, and you can use it, don't go off to the Bahamas, but, please use it to support your operation in the way you see fit.
Perfect. Thank you. Christina, I've got one for you. So can you comment on who will be evaluating the grant applications? Will it be journalists, academics, business leaders, all of the above?
Yes, all of the above. So we have reached out to many folks who were recommended to us by different field leaders, as well as some of our press forward funders, including local chapter leaders, deans of different journalism schools. We want to be able to, and even folks from journalism support organizations, such as, ones like INN or Lion. We want to be able to create a well-rounded panel of different reviewers who can look at applications from a variety of angles and talk through different strengths of the applications and help us see things that we may not see.
We got a question here about whether there's specific buckets of funds that are designated to for-profits versus nonprofits as part of this process. Gail, do you want to take that one?
No, we've got a grant budget for this open call, and we will see as things come in, how many for-profits are not, but we have not said we're only going to fund 50 nonprofits and 50 for-profits. We have not done that. We really want to see what comes in. We do just want to try to have a representation, a broad representation of types of outlets, of types of geographies, of types of budgets, because we want to be able to, we know we're sorry we can't fund everybody through this outlet, through this open call. But we do want to be able to do what philanthropy does best, is identify models and be able to share what we're learning through you all with so many other people who also probably are going through the exact same issues that you were going through. So we really want to see a range of applications in the end that end up becoming applicants.
Thank you. Christina, how specific in the application do we need to be about how we'll use the funding?
I think that is really up to you based on your mission and your activities. I feel like there is nothing wrong with being focused. And again, in some of these questions, I'm hearing, how do we know if we're too small? What if we serve a very small neighborhood? That is totally okay because you are responding to a need that you have identified in your community. And if what that takes is a very specific use of these funds and a very specific approach, let us know. It is really up to you to tell us, again, what Courtney said, paint the picture of the context, paint the picture of your audience, and paint the picture of how you are meeting those audience needs.
I have a more philosophical kind of future question for you, Dale. How do you think this open call will impact local newsrooms and communities across the country? And how has the initial press forward vision changed and evolved to bring us to this moment?
Well, thanks for that really large question. Press forward is in its infancy. Let's be clear. And I said we're a learning community, and that we are. Journalism philanthropy is fairly new. You all didn't need philanthropy 15 years ago. And so if you talk to funders who have been slowly funding in this space over the last few years, they have different opinions about should we fund public media or radio stations or hyperlocal or language or big versus small or partnerships. They're funding all over the place. That's a good thing. And so what we're hoping to do in Press Forward is, at a minimum, the two things we want to do in Press Forward is shine a light on the importance of local news. We want donors, individual wealthy individuals, foundations, local funders, residents, people who might, subscribe to your outlet. We want them to understand that local news is as important as the arts, it's as important as healthcare and housing, because it really does decrease polarization, it increases community building, and it really helps our democracy thrive. So at a minimum, we want to shine a light in ways, this is like a campaign or a movement. We're thinking about it not just beyond the money. So that 5 years from now, I am not going in a room and someone is asking me, why should I support local news? I want people to be asking me 5 years from now, how can I support local news? And how long can I support local news? We want that to be the question. Along the way, we're going to learn a lot of different things with your help. which is why I say, you know, be in touch with us. Even please fill out that Just Fund profile. We really want our funders and donors to be able to see how many of you are out there. What are you doing? What is working? What changes are happening on the ground based on your reporting and your work? So we don't have all the answers yet for Press Forward, but we want to get people to understand the importance of local news, and we want to raise more money to support all of you as much as we can.
Perfect, thank you. Christina, we're getting some questions in, related to the folks from the audience who actually want to raise their hand to offer to be a grant reviewer and advisor. What is our response?
So if you could please send an email to grants@pressforward.news and with the subject line reviewer interest, I will follow up with you. As Dale said, we are waiting to see what comes in there. It's a moving target. We don't know how many applications we will receive. We don't know how many reviewers we will need. So we are lining up people who are interested. And again, we do want each panel to be well-rounded and at least have applications be viewed by a funder, a journalist, a journalism support organization, so we get that well-rounded view. But if you're interested, send us a note. I'll follow up with you with that information. So thank you so much.
And I'll just say that we also want a broad range of reviewers. So we're not going to take all reviewers from the West Coast, or all reviewers just from a particular type of organization. We want a range of them too.
So speaking of not having all reviewers from the West Coast, there were some questions in the chat about, do we have kind of quotas on how many newsrooms from a specific geographic area we will consider funding?
We don't, but as you would in any application process like this, we can't show that we're only funding all East Coast groups or all West Coast groups, or all groups just in the South, even though we understand there is need all over. And so we don't have quotas in any way, shape, or form. We will be looking for groups that represent the range of both size of organizations, geography of organizations, types of outlets, right? So we won't select 100 print, probably. We probably want some that do digital or texting or, some other new thing that I may not know about. Think about this as we really do want to try to we want to support gaps in coverage, and we want to be able to show people what's the range of things that you all are doing that we can share with others to inspire and to help other people think about how they can be doing what you all are doing.
Thank you. Christina, a question. So does this open call prioritize daily local news over investigative or accountability reporting? Should investigative focused outlets bother to apply?
I definitely think you should apply. Again, if you are under $1 million and do original local reporting, definitely apply. That's all I'll say. Please apply.
Yeah, I'll just say when we talk to outlets, we're talking to outlets now every week, every day, and it's lovely to see the range of types of things that you all are doing. From investigative, accountability, community, civic, following the kids, the sports, all of that is needed. We're not picking winners here on that. We understand that we need all of it. So if you are more on one side or the other, please apply. That's okay. We want to be able to show funders that all of that is important. We're not picking winners in any of those particular categories.
We have a question about coaching. And so Annie, we may have you come back and answer this one. What do you think the most effective use of coaching sessions looks like? And what materials should we share with coaches and when?
That's a great question. I think the most effective way to use the coaches is when you've given a little bit of thought to the guidelines, what Press Forward is looking for, the initial application that they ask you to submit, and have a sense of what you want to apply for, rather than going into the coach as a blank slate and asking them to tell you what you should do. So you should give it a little bit of thought first. And you may want to go through some of those chapters that we have online on grant writing to help get the juices flowing and start thinking about it. When you get to your coach, I think the best thing to have is, you could have drafted something completely and they could just review it for you if you feel confident and you want to jump right in. But you may want to just put together an outline of sort of what you're asking for, that's sort of based on the questions that are in the application, what you're asking for and for what kind of program and how much money and so forth. And they can help you shape that if you're sort of at a lack of words or sort of understanding how to structure it. Yossi, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just really quickly, logistically, there will be a spot on the form to include attachments like Word documents, links to Google Docs, or even just be able to type directly in the form. So you will be able to provide all that context directly to the coach as well.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you both. Really appreciate it. Last question, because I know we're basically at time. So will you be sharing the organizations that are declined funding with other foundations?
So we hope everybody fills out a Just Fund profile. So even if you got declined from this first open call, as long as that profile is in the system, yes, we will be sharing all of that information with our other aligned, pooled local funders, which is why we tell everybody, please, at a minimum, fill out a profile.
So we're basically at time here, and I know there's still 74 open questions. Some of them I think we actually got to and were able to answer as part of this Q&A. The rest we're going to be going through and making sure that we get you responses probably, on our open call page or through our blog. We'll make sure that all of your questions get answered here. And if you have any remaining questions, please send them over to us, grants@pressforward.news. I'm sure we're going to get flooded after today's webinar, so give us a minute. We'll make sure we get every single one of your responses. Any closing thoughts, Dale?
Just thank you so much for being willing to even consider this opportunity. We're in partnership with all of you. We thank you for all that you're currently doing. You really are almost frontline workers, really helping save our democracy and really help rebuild our communities. So thank you for what you already do, and we hope to see you apply.
Perfect. Thank you. Christina, any other words to close us out?
Good luck. I'm rooting for you. I know that this is a new experience for many of you, but I believe you can do it.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.